Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at onpurposely.com.
Hey friend, quick episode note. We have a guest on today. I'm really thrilled that we're going to be able to dive into this topic, but it is one that deals with grief and the loss of a beloved family member. And so if you're not quite ready for one of your kiddos to overhear that conversation, we understand this is a chance to put in those earphones. But you might also think it could be a good conversation to have, maybe a great conversation starter. Just please be aware that it does involve the loss of a family member that is a child and a family's path to healing and conversation. So I just wanted to give you that little note, and then we're going to dive into the episode.
Now, all the guilt and shame that I had from losing River slowly started to fall apart because all this guilt that I was carrying, that the world said, Granger, you need to let go of this guilt. You need to forgive yourself. You don't need to feel sorry for yourself or feel guilty for yourself. You need to let it go. And practically, I couldn't understand how to do that. How do you forgive yourself? How do you let it go? Well, the gospel of Jesus is the only worldview that says, you can't. I can. I make you clean. You are guilty. You are full of shame. But come to me. I release you of that. I cleanse you. I forgive you, not because of what you do, not because of anything you say or practice, but because I went to the cross with it. And I died on the cross for sin so that you could be clean.
I'm Julie Lyles Carr. This is the AllMomDoes podcast, part of the Purposely Podcast Network. And we love coming alongside you in all the seasons of your life, for the kids you're raising, the marriage you're nurturing, the career you're chasing, and that spiritual life that you're growing. Today, I am so honored to have on the podcast a country music star, a New York Times bestselling author, an all-around great guy, and somebody with a whole lot of wisdom that's been hard-earned. Granger Smith, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much. I don't know if I could live up to that introduction, but thank you.
I think you already have. We are both Austinites, transplants to the Austin area. When did you get here to Austin?
Let's see, Amber and I, we started here when we got married in 2010.
Okay.
2010. So I came here a little before that, probably in the end of 2009.
Okay, we've been here since 2007, which, if you're not familiar with Austin, that makes Granger and I practically natives to the area, because this area now has so many people moving in, and we have seen the skyline change. We have seen all of the congestion on the highways get worse, and we've also seen Austin become the popular kid on the block, and we are still here. So it's great to meet somebody else in the area. You spent a lot of time in the music industry. What was that career like? And I know that you've kind of made an official exit. So tell me about that.
Yeah, I was in music for as long as I could, really. 24 years or so, longer than I've done anything else. That was the touring side of it, 24 years. And so, another 10 years of just playing around and playing in the North Texas Opry circuit for probably 10 years before that. So most of my life, of my life, I've played music and traveled and toured and made albums and wrote songs and made music videos for those songs. And it's something I'm very passionate about. I still love it. I love every bit of it. I was born to love it.
Yeah.
And I didn't leave because of any reason of getting burned out or needing to slow down or needing to spend more time with the family or anything like that. Those aren't any of the reasons. I believe that the best way to explain it is what I said on the final show of my farewell tour in August of 2023. And I said, in Matthew chapter 13, Jesus told a parable to his disciples. He said, the kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field that a man found and covered up. And in his joy, he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. And so I have found something that is of more value than the music business. And to have it is worth giving up that huge passion and huge love of mine that is music, because frankly, I just need more time to do things like this interview.
Right. And you are also attending seminary. You have put legs
Uh,
to that desire to get out there and to really dig deep, which is fascinating. What has that transition been like to go from being on the road to being in the classroom?
yeah, and it's crazy because I was also still on the road when I started seminary, so I was doing a little both, which is just a crazy dynamic, as you can imagine. Going through seminary during the day and then going to play a bar at night with the guys. Well, not a bar, but a place that serves alcohol, I should say. And I, as much as I talk on the different platforms that I have, I want to be poured into doubly from what I'm pouring out. Otherwise, I think I might be in danger of deceiving myself.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm trying to do. Just responsibly equip myself as much as possible.
That's great. I love that you bring up that there can be things that we can love and be really passionate about, but our God is not, but we are finite beings when it comes to time and capacity. The willingness to say, there are 24 hours in a day. And if I'm going to chase this thing, that means naturally I'm going to have to let go of potentially some other things on this side. How has that been making peace with that? Because Granger, we live in a culture that really wants to tell us that we should find our passion and chase that full on and never let it go, or we can do all the things, or if we just really want things bad enough, we will make the time to make it happen. What was that conversation with yourself like, saying, hey, realistically, kids, wife, home, this passion to uncover this treasure and this dual passion of music, but something's got to give. What was that internal conversation like?
Yeah, I completely agree. And it depends on what worldview you come from to approach that problem of how do I handle my time.
Mm.
And if you come from the worldview, the Christian worldview that says you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind, if that is where your starting point is, and everything else kind of is an overflow of that, and we could have all kinds of incredible passions and gifts and talents that we utilize as a secondary causation of loving our Lord, our God, with all our heart, soul, and mind, then we start to realize a couple things. And for me, one of those realizations was, and I have to be honest, that it wasn't only about time. It was also that I could not reconcile getting up on the stage and promoting myself and not just that, but needing myself to shine and needing people to praise me in order that I could sell the product of me. And that was very difficult to reconcile over the years of reading things like, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross and follow me. And it was like, and when I say this, when I have this conversation, I'm not talking to anyone else. I'm only speaking through my own sanctification of what it just began to feel yucky to me. I'll put it that way.
Right.
It started to feel, and that's not to say that I don't love music or I don't love touring or it's not a huge passion, but the act of that, of the promotional side of it, began to feel yucky to me, to also reconcile, but I'm chasing the Lord with all my heart and mind and soul. So as I started to think, well, maybe I should give it up. Lord, I'll surrender this to you. And as I started that process, I started to feel peace in that. And then I finally let it go. And immediately after I let it go, I felt so much peace and rest. And so to answer your question, where am I now with all of this? I feel great.
Yeah.
I feel great. I feel like I am I'm flowing with the current right now where I need to be.
I really appreciate you sharing that, because I myself have been through a season. I have other people in my life who are in seasons of being in the midst of good things, lots of different doors they could go down and paths. And yet at the same time, that tension, that conflict that we can feel in trying to really know which way we're supposed to go, what that's supposed to look like, or trying to, hang on to two different things that don't seem to be in harmony, and seeking God to make those choices. I really appreciate you talking us through what that journey was like for you. Granger, you have been really open, transparent about the process of losing your son, River. If the listener is not familiar with your story, would you mind sharing that with us and the events that led up to that experience?
Yeah, it's almost impossible to have this conversation without at least going there because one, so far somebody might be listening to this and thinking, well, why did the guy all of a sudden decide that, all of a sudden this guy has sanctification kicking in, all of a sudden he's in seminary, all of a sudden he's really critically thinking through all these things. Why did he do this for 24 years? And now is the time that he's really thinking through these type of ideas. And really the catalyst of that was suffering for me. I'm not the first to say that. God uses suffering in so many ways, and he has for so many people over millennia as the catalyst to a major change. And that's what it was for me. And that was 2019, June the 4th, when I found my little boy River in our swimming pool face down. And he had only been in there maybe 30 seconds, maybe 60 seconds. I was in the backyard with him at the time, and I was playing gymnastics with my daughter. River was playing water gun fight with my son. And somehow in the course of a very short period of time, he got into our gate. And we believe was trying to get a water gun out of the water that he dropped in there and slipped in silently. I saw him as I was doing this gymnastics routine with my daughter. I noticed that it was quiet. I turned around, and just about 20 feet behind me, there he was. And so I crashed into the pool and picked it up. He picked him up. He was lifeless. The EMT men and women were able to regain a heartbeat through electric shock. Even after my failed CPR attempt, I didn't really know how to do it. We rushed him to the hospital, and about 24 hours later is when they announced it was too late. It took him about 10 minutes to arrive, emergency services, which is just too long for his little body to go without oxygen. So that began a journey for me. My life was absolutely wrecked. It was just crushed. Everything that I knew, everything that I loved was either changed forever or not there anymore at all. And everything that I had built, everything that I thought that I had control over, I no longer did, including my faith. I grew up a Christian. I don't ever remember a time in my life when I didn't call myself a Christian. I was always in church and youth camps, and always singing with the proverbial choir, and that began to change as the decades went on. Not the confession of me being a Christian, that didn't change, but rather the evidence of my life to reflect that's what changed. And I see that now in hindsight. I didn't see it then. I didn't see that our faith, a faith that's alive and active and saving, is effectively acted out in the form of obedience, not because we're earning anything with it, but because when you love someone, you should live a life that reflects that love. Otherwise, not because you're earning the love, but because otherwise it's probably not love. If you're not living a life of love. Like if I told you I loved my wife, then you would expect me to act loving to her. And you would be surprised if I didn't, and you would in fact question if I even loved her at all. Well, that's what was happening to my Christianity as I was going through my faith and realizing through that grief and heartache and shame and guilt that I felt after losing River. I realized that I wasn't getting better. I was only getting worse. And it wasn't until later that I realized that's because I was relying on myself, my own help mechanisms, my own ways of coping. And although I could say a prayer and, God help me, there was no craving reading his word. There was no, I'm going to be at church when those doors open. There wasn't, I'm going to be in my grief group with all my other brothers that are walking me through this. There wasn't no growth in my prayer life. Once again, not that any of that stuff matters for our salvation, but it should be a clear overflow from a saving faith that we have. And I didn't have any of that. And so I slowly got worse and worse. And that's where I was about 6 months after losing Riv, when I just decided I should probably end my life. That might be the best way to fix all of this. And it was It was on that dark night in Boise, Idaho, when I finally reached rock bottom, when I realized I was hanging on to myself and not a savior. And so upon that night, that was the night I completely surrendered. Jesus, save me. Please, God, Jesus, save me. So I was really an open book, an open, clean slate at that point. It was like the metal, that goes through a crucible that's finally completely melted. It has no more shape to it. That was me in December of 2019. And then it still took about 3 months after that of now searching for, what does this mean? What does it mean to be a Christian? What does it mean to truly love Jesus? And it was March 1st, 2020, when I was listening to a sermon, as I was just on this endless search of how do I love Jesus? What does this mean? If Jesus saved me that night, that dark night, what does it mean to love him? And he says in John 14, as the pastor was preaching this on YouTube as I was listening to it, the disciple asked Jesus, Lord, why is it that you manifest yourself to us, but not to the world? And Jesus said, and I'm leaning in like, okay, I'm interested in this answer. Well, what does he say? What's he about to say? And he said, if anyone loves me, he will keep my word, and my Father will love him, and we'll come to him and make our home with him. And it was like reverse psychology on me, because I knew I was loved, overwhelmingly loved. That's what I felt in the moment. I am loved. I'm an adopted son. I am yours. And yet this reverse psychology said, the way you could tell who love Jesus, those people, the way you could tell who they are is those are the people that keep his word. And so I was like, I don't even know what it is.
Yeah.
I want this, but Lord, I don't even know what your word is. So I needed to start. And I ran home, and told my wife, I said, hey, we're reading the Bible. No more devotionals. We don't need any more salad. We need to go straight to the steak. We need some meat in our lives. And once I started reading the Bible, that was revealing to me who he is. That's the question I wanted to know all along, is who is this Jesus really? And we can't really know him unless we see him for who he has revealed himself to be in the Bible.
Right.
And as I read and I was immersed in this, I just kept reading, and all the guilt and shame that I had from losing River slowly started to fall apart, because all this guilt that I was carrying, that the world said, Granger, you need to let go of this guilt. You need to forgive yourself. You don't need to feel sorry for yourself or feel guilty for yourself. You need to let it go. And practically, I couldn't understand how to do that. How do you forgive yourself? How do you let it go? Well, the gospel of Jesus is the only worldview that says, you can't. I can. I make you clean. You are guilty. You are full of shame. But come to me. I release you of that. I cleanse you. I forgive you. Not because of what you do, not because of anything you say or practice, but because I went to the cross with it. And I died on the cross for sin, so that you could be clean, so that when God, you could be reconciled to God the Father. And that just blew me away. I just thought, I am free. I'm released of this guilt. Not because I went through enough therapy that taught me how to release it, because Jesus said I am. And that set me on a new path.
So profound to see you unpack that there were tools, there was a grief group, there were different things that were coming alongside, but the real healing that you needed had to start at that foundational level of realizing Christ's work for you on the cross. Really, really beautiful. Because so often I think we begin to approach these hardships, these struggles, these places of suffering from the tool side first instead of the relationship side first. And the tools are fantastic.
Yeah, it's good you said that. We need that. We need the grief groups. We need the devotionals. We need the tools. We need the books that give you the step-by-step on how to handle certain. We need that stuff. But that can't be the foundation of it.
Right. Granger, how do you look at, because I'm sure you have so many people now approach you with really deep stories of loss. First of all, how do you carry some of that weight because I know, having served in vocational ministry for a long time, there were times that even though I would have told you I was leaning on Jesus and I knew that I was able to do this work through God, there were times that the weight of other people's hurts became really heavy. And in the experience that you've had with an even bigger community around you and a more news carried story, those who want to encounter you. So first, how have you navigated carrying that? And secondly, for those who get caught, I think there are those people who go numb in situations like this. There are those who are able to press into their faith in a fresh way. And then there are those who get angry, and the anger just grows and grows and grows. So how do you still protect your heart and the healing that you've done while also serving others? And what do you say to someone who they're listening to you? It sounds great, but their anger is still so profound, they can't even get to a place of creating foundation?
Yeah, those are great questions. And I'll kind of put that into two parts. I'll put the angry person in the second part. And the first part is just how do we serve others faithfully and yet and still have a fresh heart, so that we could. It's like on the airplane when they tell you put on the oxygen mask. The adults put on the oxygen mask first before you put it on the children, and that's so that if you're not breathing, you're not going to help anybody. So that if you put it on the children first and you're not breathing, that doesn't help anybody on the plane. So that's the kind of the same mentality, and that goes back to spiritual disciplines. We have to have intact spiritual disciplines. We see the spiritual disciplines played out perfectly by Jesus, and there's a lot of spiritual disciplines. Reading our Bible, our prayer time, fasting, meditating on the Word, sitting under faithful preaching of the Word. You could memorize the Word. There's a lot of things that help harness us to be more available to be saturated by God's Word. So we watch Jesus, for instance, and this is where I'll make the point. Jesus could have sat in these villages as the people were lined up to be healed. He could have just gone 24 hours a day, just gone, just healed. But he would sit there in a town like Capernaum, and the whole town knew about him, and they would all come to him, and he would retreat to the wilderness for solitude. God incarnate, the Son incarnate, comes to earth and retreats into the wilderness away from people that need him, so that his batteries could be recharged. Mm-hmm. Now, what does that say for us? What does that say for me? So, someone with a 1/1,000,000th of the faith that the God man had. And what does that say for me if I'm trying to just grind it out, answer more emails, talk to more people about their loss? That stuff is, if it is critical, and it's a critical ministry for us, but if it is so critical, we should treat it that way and treat it like Jesus did. I'm going to give all I have, and then when I don't have any more left to give today, I'm going to retreat into the wilderness and I'm going to recharge my batteries. So I have to think of it that way. For instance, this interview I'm doing right now, I only do one a day max. I'm not going to finish this interview and then take another call and go right into and tell the river story again. I'm not going to do it. Although part of me wants to, the fleshly side of me goes, yeah, let's just spread the message as far and wide as we can. But it's just not responsible, and it's not what Jesus did.
Right.
So there's that. We have to have our own spiritual disciplines. We have to have our own time. As much as we teach, as much as we disciple, as much as we evangelize, what are we reading our word to? What happens to us? Are we being fed? Because I promise you, if we're not being fed and we're only evangelizing, only teaching, only discipling, we're going to go dry. That well is going to go dry. We're going to be in a lot of trouble.
It's probably one of the number one questions I get being a mom of 8 kids. And that question is, what on earth are y'all doing about college? And I can tell you, with 8 different kids, 8 different learning styles, 8 different ideas about what the kids want when it comes to their careers and all of the rest, college has been a big topic of conversation around here. Well, there is a university that I want you to know about because it just hits so many of the things that are really important when it comes to considering your kid's college education. George Fox University, it's the #1 private school in Oregon. It's a Christian university. It's located in the heart of the Pacific Northwest. And what's so great is in addition to a top-notch education, students have the opportunity to grow and deepen their faith, and they can learn in this really pivotal time in their lives who God made them to be. I mean, let's face it, we need more people coming out of our universities who know how to be leaders and how to be leaders with character. And George Fox University offers more than 60 academic majors, and that includes a nationally recognized engineering program, a nursing program. It allows your student to pursue their passions and prepare for the calling that God has for them. And let's not forget about fun when it comes to college. George Fox University students have a great student life. There are weekly campus events, there's chapel, there's service opportunities. There are 23 NCAA Division III athletic teams. Here's something that is important to me. There's a study abroad opportunity. So if your student wants to go and experience life somewhere else for a semester, they can do that. There's outdoor recreation because, of course, we're talking about Oregon, so gorgeous. George Fox University could be just the perfect fit for your student as you are looking into college, career, and all that goes beyond. George Fox University, where your student will learn and thrive in the center of it all.
If someone wants to talk to me about grief and loss, typically they are in a position of they're ready to talk or ready to sit down and discuss this. And I say it that way because sometimes I just listen.
Right.
Sometimes I went to coffee the other day with a guy who lost his son, and we sat there in this coffee shop for 4 hours, and I probably talked for 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of it is just listening.
Yeah.
So there's that side. And if someone is actually angry, that doesn't happen. It's a quick conversation, and that person typically only needs to hear the gospel. Instead of saying what to do, here's what to do, here's what you need, here's how I can help you, here's how I'm going to serve. It's just like Jesus came to reconcile sinners to God. He came to forgive. He came to seek and save the lost. And he did that on the cross. The blood of God paid for sin so that all who turn to him will be forgiven, will have the fruits of the Spirit like rest, peace. Jesus says, blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. How beautiful is that? It's like just the gospel to the angry people is the only thing that could break through.
Right, right. I think the wisdom of reminding people that you can have a really important, critical message in your life that you've experienced that can help others, but the willingness to make sure that you yourself are staying full is so important. And what we often expect of those who have been through really difficult situations and come out the other side, what we expect many times of ministry leaders is that 24/7 kind of thing. And you're so right. Jesus modeled for us, if you will, almost an introverted kind of pattern where he would retreat, get away, have his cup refilled, and then come back in to do this critical work that he did for us again in healing, in teaching, and spreading the word. So I love that you bring that up. Now, as you and Amber were navigating your own grief, and I'm sure that you would have incredible wisdom for couples who are having to walk through something, a grief together, you were also having to help your children navigate. And I know that the listener can go to your book, Like a River, and hear more of your memoir in terms of the experience you went through, the impact on your relationships. But you have now turned and are wanting to help resource kids and parents to navigate through loss. You know, it's interesting to me, Granger. I think in many ways in our society, we have shielded kids a whole lot from loss. We typically, when there is a funeral service, a lot of times we don't take kids, or we have childcare because we don't want them interrupting the service. We are very careful to hide different facets of loss or our own emotions from them. And what happens is we then aren't equipping kids to know how to manage the loss and grief that does come into a life. How did you and Amber begin to realize that not only were you going to have to navigate what you were going through, but your children were experiencing it in a different way, and they were going to be looking to you in one of the most confusing, wrenching times of your life and expecting you to lead them through this? When did that moment come?
I mean, like within hours of us getting the word that River was not going to come back. And that wasn't because we were just profoundly intelligent or something. It's because it was out of necessity. Like, that was one of the first thoughts we had. Oh no, we've got to tell the kids, because they were at home. You know, they weren't at the hospital, because we were there for a while, especially after we donated River's organs. That kept us there over 48 hours. So the kids were at home, and we made that drive together up I-35 back home, and they were waiting, and they didn't know. They didn't know what the outcome was. And so immediately we took them out into the backyard, and we sat on a bench, and instead of like sugarcoating it or getting into, some kind of fairy tale, we just said, River died. His little brain couldn't go that long without oxygen, and he died. And he's not coming back. We wanted to start with that instead of saying, well, if you look hard enough, you might see him in the clouds. Or when the butterflies come, River's in the butterfly. Like, we didn't want to say something stupid like that that could really damage them. So that's how it started. You heard my story about the what I went through over those 6 months. And so, theologically, I wasn't like grounded on anything really. But we did realize early on that Amber and I should talk about this openly in front of the kids. We should grieve openly. We should never hide our grief. And we should never hide our joy. That was very important too, because you have a tendency to think, we can't laugh right now. We can't watch a cartoon together as a family and giggle. How disrespectful is that for a family that just lost a child 2 months ago? And that grief comes in, or that guilt is a thief, and it comes in to steal joy. And so we realized early on, and we told the kids up front, we said, if you want to laugh, if you want to cry, if you don't want to do anything at all of those emotions are right, and they're okay. And all of us four, as it became, we went from a family of 5 to a family of 4 quickly. And we said, in this group, this tight-knit group of 4, if anyone is feeling any emotion, they are okay, and they are in a safe spot in this house. So if someone's really grieving, we're gonna gather around them. And if someone's laughing, we're not gonna ridicule them of how they could be happy in a moment like this. And that was just a day-to-day, hour-by-hour thing. We just tried to live it as best we could. And we also didn't make River's room into a shrine so we can go worship him and all his toys and his bed and pictures. But we also did not delete him from our house. We kept the things we loved, and we hung a picture of him, and we have pictures everywhere of him with the family. So we took the middle ground, and we're not going to delete him, and we're not going to make it into a shrine. He's going to be part of this family, but we're not going to think about his death all the time. So that was interesting. That's always, there's a lot of nuance in navigating that. But I think ultimately, if I could just wrap it up on that, it's just we were vulnerable in public with each other.
Right.
We were upfront vulnerable with each other.
It was honest. And I think that has a power to heal, a power to be clear, a power to validate the experiences that you were all having. That honesty is a hard-won honesty, but a powerful, powerful thing. You have a new book out for children called Up Toward the Light, for parents and kids to be able to talk through the grief process. What has been sort of the central theme of that book, and how have you tried to take such a big concept like this that, let's face it, adults can barely get our heads around, and transpose it to a key that a child can begin to understand and take in to their heart?
I think it's a conversation starter at best. I think that's what this is. It's a story about a little boy who loses his grandpa. And, I've done that twice as a little boy. And so I could relate to it, but it's really just generally, it doesn't have to be a little boy or a grandpa. It's just a general idea about losing someone that you love and how to open that conversation about it. And so this was a true story, actually, that happened to me while I was in therapy after we lost Riv. One of my little assignments in therapy was to go talk to a tree and have a conversation with the tree and write it down. Because I'd so often had called myself the rock. I wanted to be a rock. And the therapist said, well, who does a rock lean on when it needs somebody to rest on? I said, yeah, I guess that's a good point.
Yeah.
And he said, well, I would encourage you to think of yourself more as a tree that could bend and sway with the wind, and yet it has roots that intertwine with other trees. And it takes nourishment from the forest itself. And I was like, yeah. And I went into the woods and I had this conversation, as awkward as it might have been. And it took me a while to write it, but it's a conversation with a tree. And in the book, the book came from this idea. It's the idea that this tree, full of wisdom, who is able to shed leaves with the seasons, lose branches when the storm comes, intertwine its roots with the other trees of the forest, be nourished by the soil and everything that has made the soil, and yet the tree, and they find a common ground, and yet the boy comes to talk to the tree because he lost his grandpa, and the grandpa loved that tree, and yet the tree reveals that the grandpa is the one that planted the acorn. And nourished the tree. But they have this discussion, and what happens to the tree ends up telling the boy that although grandpa nourished them and they tended to them both and raised them both, if they focused downward at the soil and the roots and the fallen leaves and everything grandpa did to till that soil, they would miss the most important thing, is that is the light. They would miss reaching up toward the light, which is where real growth, true growth comes from. And so hopefully that idea could open up a conversation with a little boy or a little girl or an adult that says, all I could think about is the loss. All I could think about is the love I had for them. And the reality is that's amazing, and we're so blessed to have loved enough in order to feel the loss of that love. But if we continue to focus on that, we will never grow and will never move forward without instead looking up toward the light.
That is such a profound parable. That's how I see it, as a parable of how we can process these things, how we can begin these conversations. And so parents, that is Up Toward the Light by Granger Smith, a way to start a conversation. And again, sometimes I think we think of loss and it can be something as huge as what you and your family walked through. But it's also important to remember for kids that making a big move and your kids losing the kids they're used to going to school with in that sense can be a loss for a child. Losing a pet. I mean, there are all kinds of ways that we can begin these conversations with our kids and in no way diminish the emotions that they're having or the processing they need to go through. So be sure and make sure that those conversations are happening, even for losses that we might think, oh, well, that's just kid stuff. That's not something that is big real life. It is big real life. And how we model and how we talk about loss and grief to our children is how they will learn to process it through their lives. So resources like this, I think, can really be of help. Well, Granger, I can't thank you enough for this conversation, your vulnerability, the honesty, the wisdom, the places where you're like, I had no idea what I was doing. It's going to be really powerful to continue to see what God is doing in your life with the focus you're putting on your education at this point and serving the local church. I just want to thank you so much for your willingness to be obedient and to walk out this journey. Where can the listener go to find the book, find out more about you, engage with your family, all the things?
Oh, thank you for that encouragement. Yeah, I'm on all socials, Granger Smith, and grangersmith.com is my website. And you can find the book Up Toward the Light at any place that you like to go for books.
All righty. Well, thank you again so much for making the time for us, letting us be your interview for the day. I really appreciate that. And I love the modulation with which you are walking out this story. So thanks again so much, Granger. All right, listener, you know where to go. The show notes, Rebecca puts them together each and every week, all kinds of links. You'll find all sorts of things there. Let me know what you thought about this episode. I really think this is one of the powerful ones, hard things to talk about, but also so important. And you can engage with us at AllMomDoes.com. AllMomDoes on the socials. Again, let us know what you think about this episode. Be sure and grab the link. Send it to someone who would be encouraged by this, who is needing a path, who is needing to go up toward the light in their own life. I love engaging with you too on Instagram, Julie Lyles Carr over there, Julie Lyles Carr, all the places. And I will see you next time on the AllMomDoes podcast.